Attempt number 7. It is a new run. I want to at least see if I can beat, like, World 2 by the end of the stream. That way, then at least then I know that, yeah, I've made good progress. But yeah, let's actually, Really? That's how I die. That's how I lose the run. Okay. I feel like, that's such a dumb way to lose a run. Yeah, it's so annoying when, like, you die to just, like, a tiny mistake. That's, like, the absolute worst thing is, like, you know you failed, but it's because you're, like, you did something stupid, you know? I'm gonna spit you out, and I'm actually going to get that. Grab that crystal shard. And we're immediately going to beeline it out. You know what? I feel like I'm underestimating this ability. Just double cutter. The distance it travels, plus the size of it, actually makes it a little bit more viable, you know? Yeah, fire and bomb actually is probably one of the better abilities in the game. Oh, well, yeah. I feel like there is going to be a run where I am going to take damage on that fight. I can already tell that is going to happen. 100%. I grew up with a lot of Nintendo 64 games. Actually, let's talk about, like, what my first video game was. The first video game I ever played was Kirby's Adventure for the Nintendo Entertainment System. We had, like, the NES console. I never grew up with a SNES. I only had, essentially 2 games. Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. Like, we had Duck Hunt, but because we did not have a light gun accessory, we could never actually play Duck Hunt. We had the CRT, because that's one of the things required to play Duck Hunt, but we never had one of those, like, light gun accessories to actually play Duck Hunt. So unfortunately, yeah, we had a cartridge of, like, Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt Hybrid, but we could never actually, like, get past the title screen of Duck Hunt, because again, we just didn't have the light gun accessory. But yeah, I didn't play Super Mario Bros. Because, like, Kirby's Adventure was what kind of, like, caught my eye more. And yeah, like, Kirby's Adventure, I actually made it quite far, all things considered. I actually made it, like, almost to the end of the game. I still, like, looking back, I have no idea how I managed to get past the Meta Knight boss fight, because apparently that's, like, one of the hardest boss fights in the entire game. In fact, the one boss fight I could never get past as a kid was actually Nightmare's Power Orb form. So I never even got to the second phase of Nightmare until, like, several years later. Like, many years later, when I decided to kind of revisit Kirby's Adventure in my own time. And I actually not only beat Nightmare, but I also beat the entirety Extra Mode. And, like, Extra Mode is just unforgivingly hard in Kirby's Adventure. Like, it is not easy. Yeah, I kind of like Fireworks' range. Fireworks is actually, again, I haven't appreciated Fireworks enough. This is an insane ability to get this to get, like, in the first level of the game. But yeah, Kirby's Adventure was, like, the very first, like, NES game that I just played in general. And yeah, I almost beat the game. The first ever Nintendo 64 game I played was actually, again, probably to no one's surprise, Super Mario 64. I almost said Superman 64. Why did I say that? But yeah, Super Mario 64 was, like, the first ever Nintendo 64 game I played. And I beat the game, and I remember kind of being impressed at it back in the day. Like, I remember being impressed at it, like, after I beat the game. I did not like some of the later levels, though. I did not like Tiny Huge Island. I was not a fan of Tall Mountain. And then I remember TikTok Clock and Rainbow Ride, despite having kind of the unique aesthetics, I was, again, never a fan of them. And, like, looking back on... And again, Docks was also kind of not my thing either. And then it turns out that, like, later on, those are, like, some of, like, the worst off levels in the game. And it all makes sense. I absolutely despise Wii Mario Over the Rainbow. Wii Mario Over the Rainbow, I never beat that as a child. It's just an absolutely garbage level, because all you do is you have to like use the wing cap and the cannon, and again the wing cannon and cap can just be like very jank at like the worst of times. Again, the wing cap was never an ability I was particularly proficient in, and my gameplay with the wing cap clearly showed. After playing through Mario 64, like the next game I immediately played was Banjo-Kazooie, and like my only reaction I could just think of back in the day was, Mario 64 sucks in comparison. Again, immediately, like, after playing Banjo-Kazooie, I absolutely preferred the control style of Banjo-Kazooie over Mario 64 any day of the week. Again, I never actually beat the game because I ended up eventually having to kind of, like, attend school. You know, personal circumstances happened, and in the end, I basically had to, like, not play the game anymore, but then like other games came out and I just got invested in all those games instead. But yeah, so like the best way to describe Banjo-Kazooie is it's got a lot more like rigid and tight gameplay compared to Mario 64's more like fluid mechanics. Yeah, I grew up on a lot of like Nintendo 64 games. We ended up actually getting like Superman 64, not Superman 64. I do want to like showcase why, you know, a lot of people are wrong when they think that certain bad video games are bad. Because, like, yeah, obviously, there are a lot of modern games nowadays that were released in a half-finished state. But at the same time, those games are still very much playable. And you just, how do I explain this? You don't have games that are, like, absolutely appalling quality that, you know, you can't patch out. Like, I mean, Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet kinda tried to prove otherwise. I still don't understand why the Pokemon Company released it in the state they released it in. I am still baffled to this day. There's actually a bit of a delay in this attack. Okay. Jump. Yeah, so like the rock bounces off of projectiles, but the actual beam does not. Okay, that might actually be important to know when using this ability. But yeah, it's just, how do I explain this? Yeah, Superman 64 is basically a textbook of example of, you may think this buggy and unpolished game might be absolutely appalling quality. Superman 64 is that game which proves that like it could be so much worse. It could have been so much worse off compared to the current release. Like, Superman 64 doesn't even like play properly. Most of the time, like, yeah, it's like performance issues and maybe like a memory leak or something like that, which will eventually cause the game to crash. But it's not like the game itself is like broken from the very first level, like Superman 64, with its infamous ring flying. The best way to like describe Superman is it's essentially a ring flying simulator. That's pretty much the best way to describe it, because most people aren't even gonna get past the very first level. They're just gonna like, they won't get past the rings, and then they'll just be stuck flying through rings like for the entire game, because they won't be able to get through that. Now there is actually kind of like the beta version. The beta version of the ROM did actually get released at some point afterwards, and the beta version actually plays, it's actually more fun to play than the original game, to the point where a lot of people, like, yeah, it's definitely still like terrible. It's still terrible, but like, because it's like less rings and the controls are slightly better and whatnot, it's actually a much more enjoyable game just overall compared to its like final release product, which I think is quite funny when you think about it. Like, Titus, I think is the company name, ended up releasing a product that was like woefully unfinished. Basically, Superman 64 is basically the prime example of like when executive action goes horribly wrong. But yeah, Superman 64 showcases that like your buggy unfinished game could be so much worse off than you think. It could be so much worse off than you think. Yeah, so after I played Banjo-Kazooie is kind of like my second N64 game. My memory on what the third game I played was extremely hazy. But yeah, basically, I think the third Nintendo 64 game I played was Mario Kart 64. I could be wrong. Go here. Go here. Oh, wait. They can jump? Yeah, so if you use like a ability underwater, you move much slower. Like, you end up actually moving super slowly. Okay, this room doesn't actually do anything. This is actually quite a long level. Oh, there is Needle. Okay, let's go. We're immediately grabbing this then. Is she here? There we go. That's what I wanted to get. So it gives us one of my favorite abilities in this game. The Snowflake. And then you can just kick the enemies. We're only going to use it for, like, this room, though. But this is actually the first King Dedede section of the game. So King Dedede actually plays differently compared to Kirby. So basically, you have a run. I don't like this. I think this is actually my least favorite sections of the whole game. Because, again, you have a very awkward attack. You can only jump once, and you have a very, like, pathetic hitbox. Like, this hitbox is actually laughably bad. Jump. And we get a crystal shard. That's, I think, the end of a level. Yep, that's the end of a level. Yeah, I don't like the King Dedede sections at all. I think the King Dedede sections are really, really bad. I'm going to do this. Yeah, Snowflake is just, again, incredible of an ability. It does take a while to set up, but, like, once you set it up, it's a really good ability. I think you can still be damaged while setting it up, though. I think that is kind of, like, the one risk of the ability. But, yeah, this is actually one ability that's actually required to get a crystal shard. As you can see, there is a brown projectile, a brown block there that requires stone. And I don't think you actually get stone in this room. Oh, yeah, like, this room actually has, like, 2 paths, and I think one leads to a crystal shard while the other doesn't. And, again, we're not allowed to retry. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I did not expect that at all. We gotta do that whole second level all over again. Attempt number 9. Let's hope that attempt number 9, we actually don't die to that, I guess. It's so odd that, like, they don't have analog stick input for this game, I guess. Like, having it, like, wasn't necessary, I suppose. You're gonna throw. We're gonna jump over you. I pressed B. I pressed the B button and it didn't actually register. That was actually input delay, I think. Or maybe it's just a skill issue on my part, who knows. Attempt number 10 it is, I suppose. But note to self, for that one cave level, the left path is a mini boss is like directly below you. Then again, I could also that mini boss can also be a fun little way to show off another enemy mechanic, I suppose. I really want to, like, get to the, beat the second world. Okay, damn it. I saw the bomb, I hesitated, and I should have just kept on running. Yeah, I should have literally just kept on, like, going for it. Unfortunately, I feel like that's my biggest problem, is that I just hesitate. Because, like, again, the screen is not very, like, zoomed out. And that's kind of, like, why I'm so nervous to just kind of, like, make a mad dash for it. Yeah, there's, like, a lot of easy ways to take damage in this run. This game, to, like, balance out the difficulty, is very generous with its healing. World 4 is gonna be, like, the major roadblock of this whole run. I already know it, because you have to take bomb and stone throughout literally the entire second level of Neostar. And, like, it's an ability that can damage the player. It's an absolutely terrible ability to have to, like, rely on. So after I played Nintendo 64, Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, I played Mario Kart 64, I think was, like, the third game I played. For my birthday, I got Donkey Kong 64 with the which was pre-included with the expansion pack. I feel like, again, Donkey Kong 64 is a game, like, that while it is flawed, it still benefits from being a very unique game to this day. So, like, Donkey Kong 64, like, yeah, you could argue the worlds are too big. Yeah, Gloomy Galleon is arguably a horrible. It's just what not to do in a 3D platformer. And then, like, yeah, it may be so hard to the point where, like, most children back in the day couldn't beat the game. And then you could also argue that, like, all the backtracking to the tag barrel and whatnot. And I think the tag barrel is, to an extent, a legitimate criticism of the game. Even I will say that it's much better to play the game with a tag anywhere mod. That way then it just decreases the amount of time you have to spend going all the way back to a tag barrel and then going all the way just to change the Kong to grab one specific collectible and then end up going once again. Oh yeah, you gotta, like, redo the whole process. Like, you do a specific action with this character, you gotta go back to tag barrel. Then you gotta, like, change to this Kong, do a specific action with this Kong, go all the way back. But I think the game also does a fairly solid, a fairly reasonable job of just limiting that as much as possible. I mean, there are obviously some devious areas where that is not the case. But, like, again, those devious situations are kind of so few and far between that, like, it doesn't matter anyway. I feel like, in my opinion, like, Donkey Kong 64, while it definitely very much has its flaws, I still do think it's a very much a beloved game. Like, again, I feel like Donkey Kong 64 really kind of, like, helped push the boundaries of 3D platformers, more specifically, like, collectathon games. And I also do like it for having, like, Lanky Kong, Tiny, and Chunky Kong. I do think, like, I do like those characters. I think those characters are really enjoyable new characters. I mean, obviously, you have Donkey Kong and you have Diddy Kong from the Donkey Kong Country games. Yes, there are people who are, like, upset that, oh, Dixie Kong wasn't a thing, but, like, I feel like with Tiny Kong, I feel like Dixie and Tiny are, like, again, different enough, because, like, Tiny is meant to be, like, more nimble, and then Dixie Kong is probably supposed to be, like, stronger. I do think that Tiny Kong is, like, one of my favorite Kongs in that game, just purely for the fact that, like, she's got the whole ponytail twirl ability. You play as Tiny Kong, once you have the ponytail ability, full damage basically is non-existent. As long as you stay in the ponytail state, you will not take any full damage at all. Like, no matter how far down you fall, full damage just doesn't exist. However, the moment you let go of that A button, you're taking full damage. So the best thing to do is hold A, wait until you hit the ground, and then, like, try again. But then Banjo-Tooie. I think Banjo-Tooie, between Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, I think for replayability, I'm more of a Banjo-Tooie person. Because, again, there's less collectibles required to actually beat the game. Now, you could argue, like, oh, like, the game is just, like, worse because it runs at a lower performance than on the Nintendo 64. Again, I would say the Xbox version of Banjo-Tooie is worse than the original because of the locked frame rate. So a lot of people point to the Canary Mary boss fight as to, like, why the game is so much worse than Kazooie. The Canary Mary race in Nintendo 64 was actually balanced around having a inconsistent frame rate. So there were certain areas of Cloud Cookie Land where the Canary Mary race, the frame rate would actually kind of drop. There were, like, legitimately areas where you had opportunities to get late because the game determines the player's speed, like, movement speed in that race by how many button presses do you do every, like, X amount of frames on average. Because in Banjo-Tooie, that race was determined by being a 30 FPS game, it's assuming button presses every 30 frames a second. And because of that, by locking it to a doubled frame rate, it kind of bogs out the entire race, which is why the race is just so hard. Because again, it's double the base frame rate and it's locked frame rate. Instead of being like, oh, 30 frames and it ends up varying, it's 60 FPS and it's locked to 60 FPS, meaning there's no frame drops to kind of take advantage of. Again, that completely breaks the whole race. That's the reason why there's, like, the whole, like, argument of, oh, you need a turbo controller to end up getting anywhere. You kind of do need a turbo controller because, again, the race itself is bugged. The race is not designed for a 60 FPS game. The race was designed for being 30 FPS and variable, and breaks the entire game as a result. They made a change that ended up making the overall gameplay worse. Like, yeah, Pterodactyl Land now no longer runs at 10 FPS, but, like, that doesn't mean anything if the rest of the game itself is kind of broken as a result. I feel like they shouldn't have, like, callously locked the frame rate. The cutscene music is kind of off as well. Banjo-Kazooie already kind of showed that locking the frame rate when the cutscene music is built with the frame drops in mind is probably not the smartest idea. Switch Online version of Banjo-Kazooie is like 30 FPS, a locked 30 FPS, I believe, but they actually emulate the frame drops during the original cutscene. That way, then the cutscene music isn't just completely off. But yeah, in Banjo-Tooie, that music is just completely out. And I wonder if they're gonna, like, take the time to, like, emulate the frame drops of every cutscene. I feel like that might actually be kind of like an interesting thing to kind of maybe discuss about. Again, Banjo-Tooie, I think, is an excellent game. But yeah, I think the reason why like so many people dislike Banjo-Tooie is for the, God forbid, backtracking. And like for me, the backtracking is actually not that fine because in Banjo-Tooie, you can actually beat the game without ever backtracking once. Like, I don't think that's a thing that's actually brought up because there is one content creator who actually did a video actually proving that, you know, given that the parameters are right, even if you kind of like avoid counting detour jiggies, that you can still beat the game without ever backtracking once. With some caveats. Like, obviously, I feel like sometimes, like, the backtracking even doesn't really last that long anyway. And a lot of people just kind of love to overblow it out of proportion for absolutely no reason, aside from just farming clout. I think Banjo-Tooie, the backtracking is not as bad in Banjo-Tooie as, like, everyone makes it out to be. I think the backtracking is actually relatively tame for the most part because like you can literally just play through the entire game and then you can just kind of go on a backtracking spree, and that's really like all you need to do. Again, the backtracking spree is not as bad as everyone kind of makes it out to be. Everyone just loves to kind of like overblow everything out of proportion, in my opinion. At least that's kind of what I see a lot on the internet. Like, would the game be better if it had less backtracking? Probably, but I feel like at the same time, it's not the end of the world if there is like all that backtracking. The main highlight of Banjo-Tooie is the fact that it actually like enhances a bunch of Banjo-Kazooie's original abilities from like the first game. The claw swipe, like the absolutely pathetic claw swipe attack, has been replaced with a grounded version of the rat-a-tat rap, which is like the one best ability in Banjo-Tooie. And then the roll attack, instead of just being locked to a forward movement, the roll attack now actually, you can turn with the roll attack, and I think it actually moves slightly faster as well. So again, the roll attack is a little bit more viable as a result. Then you have like, again, the rat-a-tat rap is kind of unchanged, but like that's just simply because it's the rat-a-tat rap. Beak Buster can be kind of manipulated slightly. So if you're like a little bit off target, you can kind of shimmy it a little bit, and it makes it really good for like hitting certain like switches and whatnot. Get rid of you. Get rid of you. Let that fall. Oh, I did not mean to slide there. I meant to drop through.
Well, you've reached the end of this video, so why not like the video and leave a comment, as it helps out the channel a lot. And make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on the next video. Also, follow me on Twitter and Twitch, as I post daily on Twitter and I stream all this content live on Twitch. Links are in the description below. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.